Hey guys, welcome back to RC. Today we are going to do another shootout, this time of basically the $100 entry-level radio class. We're going to find out which of these radios is the best. So these three represent the top selling basically RC radios on the market today. We've got the Sanwa MX-V on the left, the Futaba 3PV in the center, and the Spektrum DX5C. And yes, I have owned all of these radios, so I'm going to give you my full and honest opinion. Not sponsored by anybody, did not get any of these things for free. I paid for them all myself, and I'm going to give you the full-on lowdown on which radio is the best. So the $100 entry-level radio class is probably the most popular radio class out there. This is for those that want to upgrade from an RTR radio, maybe do some club racing, do some crawling, do some bashing, all that good stuff. Lets you control a bunch of different models, so you can control up to 10, 20, maybe 30 different RC vehicles with one controller. So it's nice for those of us who have growing fleets of vehicles. I'm going to rate these radios in a bunch of different categories, first to third. I'm not going to go through like super long details on each different category, but I just want to give you my opinion on how they perform in relation to each other in a bunch of different areas. So we're going to go through a bunch of different things, starting off with features. And of these three radios, the Spektrum by far has the most features. It's got stability control, it's got a really nice menu system, it controls up to 5 channels, it's got programmable buttons, it's got every adjustment you could need, including some that you probably don't need, like speed, handles DSM2, DSMR receivers. It's really the feature king of these three. By far has the most capabilities, and it's really sort of head and shoulders above the other two radios in terms of what you can actually do with the radio. Second place, I'm going to rank the Futaba 3PV. It's fairly basic radio, not a whole lot of extra stuff, but you can do actually battery telemetry if you get the right receiver. It also has ABS, and also has 4-wheel steering mixing, so you can do a little bit of crawling with this radio. In third place is the Sanwa MX-V. It's the oldest of the group, pretty much the most basic radio. It's just got standard adjustments that you're going to make with the radio in terms of like expo, endpoint adjustment, dual rate, that kind of thing. But there's really no advanced features. It's got ABS, but that's pretty much it. No telemetry, no stability control, just the most basic of the three radios. So first, second, third is the Spektrum, the Futaba, and then the Sanwa. Let's move on to the design, and my pick for the best design, and by design I mean basically how this thing was sort of shaped, designed, and sort of the layouts of everything. I'm going to pick the Futaba 3PV. I think it's the best looking radio transmitter. It's kind of the most elegant, simplest, got a really nice big display, simple controls. The controls are really nice. Sort of this simple antenna in the front, doesn't really stick out. So just a really nice, elegant design. Second place, I'm going to rank the Sanwa MX-V. Still a solid radio, not the most elegant looking thing, a little bit on the bulky side when you compare it to the Futaba, but not bad overall, still a pretty good radio. Last place, definitely the Spektrum DX5C. I mean, it's just kind of a beast of a radio. It's big, it's bulky, it's kind of archaic looking, not the best design, excuse me, but if if you want form over function, I would pick the Futaba as basically the leader in the class. So let's move on to the controls. And by controls, I'm talking basically about the handle, the trigger, the steering wheel, all the little switches and stuff. And in first place for the controls, I'm going to rate the Spektrum. It's got a really nice grip. It's got a little bit of rubberized textured, so a little non-slip feeling in the hand. The trigger feels very smooth, very just about the right spring tension for me. The steering wheel is not the greatest. It's got kind of a slippery foam around the wheel. The wheel's a little bit on the big side, especially compared to these other two. Kind of depends on your hand size, and whether you like things or not. But it's also got lots of switches. So overall, the controls are very nice. Really, the only things I don't like are the slippery foam, and there's sort of this notch here in the center, right at neutral. Another nice feature of the controls is adjustable spring tension for your steering wheel, so you can actually get that to your liking. So overall, I do like the hand, sort of the handle, the controls of the Spektrum the best between these three radios. And second place, I'm actually going to pick the Sanwa MX-V. I also like the layout of the handle and the trigger and the steering wheel. Really the only parts that let me down are the overly stiff steering wheel and the overly stiff trigger. There's no adjustments, and unfortunately for whatever reason they made them, you know, very, very stiff, especially the steering wheel is just kind of crazy stiff. But in second place, that's my pick. And last place is obviously the Futaba. Really the thing I don't like about the Futaba is the handle. It's just kind of got this like sweeping back handle that makes it kind of hard to reach the trigger, and the trigger's kind of like upswept and kind of far away from the handle. And then the other thing is, you know, when you use the trigger, when you go full brake, your finger actually hits the underneath here on the top of the radio, so kind of annoying. Your finger's always banging in that. The wheel itself is very nice. I like the spring tension, very smooth, very linear, no slop. The foam is really good, the size is perfect. So I really like the steering wheel, but the handle and sort of the trigger, you know, control layout is what puts it in last place for me. So that's going to be third in the controls category. Let's move on to construction, and my pick for the best construction of these vehicles is the Sanwa MX-V. I feel like the plastics are maybe just a hair better than the other two. Just a very solid feeling radio. Second place, I'm going to pick the 3PV. Plastics are also very good. It's kind of lightweight, but just a really nice construction overall. You know, very little gaps or anything in the plastics. Just a well-designed and well-manufactured product. Spektrum DX5C is bulky. You know, I don't know. There's just something about this radio I'm not particularly fond of how it sort of feels in your hand. I'm sure it's solid. I don't think, you know, nothing's going to break or anything like this, but it's just kind of a clunky, big, sort of old-school looking radio. Let's move on to performance, and by performance I'm basically talking about how the radio actually performs on the racetrack in terms of frame rate, latency, you know, sort of how responsive it is. And from what I can tell and sort of the data I found and what I've felt in my own driving is that the Futaba does actually feel the fastest. I think the frame rate somewhere around 6.8 milliseconds according to Futaba. It does feel fast. It definitely is running, it feels like it's running one of the faster protocols out there. I assume actually as fast as the higher end Futabas. It does feel like a very responsive, very fast radio. Second place, I'm going to pick the Spektrum DX5C. It gets down to 11 milliseconds, which is not the fastest of all the Spektrum radios. Actually, the DX5R gets down to, I believe, it's 5.5 milliseconds. Still fast enough, you know, it's not going to feel slow or unresponsive or, you know, kind of vague when you're driving the car, but doesn't feel quite as fast as the Futaba in my driving at least. And for sure, the Sanwa is the slowest of the three. Probably not the best racing radio, just because of the slower frame rate, the higher latency. You always feel sort of a step behind with this. You know, and it kind of depends on, you know, how sensitive you are to this type of thing. I definitely do notice the difference between this and these two are a lot more similar, but the Sanwa definitely feels much slower to me. So I'm going to pick the Sanwa last in the performance category. Next thing I want to talk about is the menu and the display, and by far the Spektrum has the best display menu system. It's basically got this full dot matrix display with graphics, so you can actually scroll down through the different menu items, select things, actually get into like sort of sub menus and stuff like that. It's got a nice little back and clear button so you can get back to the main menu. The display, although it's a little bit on the small side, is by far the best because it is a full graphical display as opposed to these other two, which are just sort of fixed LCD displays. So I'm going to pick the Spektrum the best in this category. Second place, I'm going to go with the MX-V. It's got a fairly large display. The menu system is, you know, not quite as annoying to go through as the Futaba. You can see all the adjustments fairly easily. The up down buttons makes it very easy to get through stuff, and then the plus minus actually makes it easy to adjust things. So that's my choice for second place. And last place is the Futaba. It's got a crazy amount of menu items. I think it takes like 27 button presses to get through the entire thing. As you can see, I'm still scrolling through all the different menu items and then finally got back to the front. So 27 button presses to get through the whole menu system is just way too many. Display is okay, you know, it's still clear and you can has nice large legible numbers and stuff, but overall I like this menu system and this display the worst of the 3. Let's move on to binding now. So Definitely something you're going to be doing when you're using these radios is binding it to different receivers. And first place for me is going to be the Futaba. The Futaba is actually the easiest to bind. All you have to do is turn on the radio, turn on the car with the receiver, and then push the bind button on the receiver with these things sort of near each other, and you're instantly bound. And you know, it's very straightforward, very fast. Second place is going to be the Sanwa MX-V. Sanwa is also fairly straightforward. You know, basically you just have to turn this thing on, turn on the radio with the bind button held down on the receiver, and then hit the bind button on here, and then you're bound. So not too cumbersome, but obviously not as simple and fast as the Futaba. And last place is definitely Spektrum, and it's in last place by a mile. It still uses a bind plug with most of the receivers. The bind, you know, sort of procedure is very onerous, very complicated. I also had problems binding sometimes with like low voltage batteries and stuff like that that weren't fully charged. So binding on the Spektrum is really the weakest point of the radio. Next category is the battery, and all of these use 4 AA's, although the Futaba actually has the option for life or LiPo battery, because basically it's got a little plug there on the bottom, so you can just take out the tray and plug in whatever battery you want. Really nice system. Big fan of that. It's got a Futaba plug, go figure. So that's first place for me for the battery. Second place, you know, these two are pretty much a tie between the Sanwa and Spektrum. If I had to pick one, I'd probably pick the Sanwa, just because I think the cord that's available to cut off if you want to remove this battery tray and put on your Futaba connector is a little bit longer than the Spektrum, but they're really, really close. I mean, if I have to split hairs, I guess I go Sanwa and then Spektrum second and third, but you know, there's really almost no difference between those two. Next category is the manual, and I do not have all the manuals in front of us, but for me the manual for the Futaba is the best. It seems the most clear. I really like the illustrations. It's printed on, you know, sort of a nice glossy paper. Second place for me is the Sanwa. It's just simple black and white paper, black and white graphics and stuff, but didn't really find any errors. It seemed a little more logically laid out than the Spektrum manual. Spektrum manual had a couple of little small things, like it talked about an LED light on the front of the radio. You know, sort of the explanation of some of the menu items is a little bit confusing and sort of could be, I think, organized a little bit better. But there's really nothing wrong with the radio. I'm sorry, the manual. They're all good manuals, and you'll be fine with all of them. So that's the manual, first, second, third. Let's move on to receivers, and this is an important one, right? You're going to have more than one car, you're going to have more than one receiver, and so I'm taking into account basically size of the receivers, the price of the receivers, you know, how responsive they are, that kind of thing. And for me, definitely the Futaba's got the best receivers, and that's really just because it's got this excellent R204 GFE receiver. It's a antenna-less wireless receiver. It's 3 channels. It's fairly small footprint. You know, and it's like $40, a fairly inexpensive receiver. Second place for me is going to be the Spektrum. Receivers are also fairly expensive. I think the cheapest one is $30 for like a 2-channel or 3-channel receiver that runs DSMR. So they're fairly inexpensive. They're not really generally on the small side. They're sort of medium sized. But they're fairly inexpensive, have enough capability, fast enough. And so for me, second place is Spektrum. That, you know, to get the wireless ones is fairly expensive. I think they're generally closer to like $80 or $100. So you can't really get a good value like the R204 GFE like you can for the Futaba. So that's why it's in second place. And last place is definitely the Sanwa. The Sanwa receivers are by far the most expensive. The cheapest one runs for $60. And they go all the way up to, you know, over $100. So Sanwa receivers are really, really expensive. They're close to like twice as much as the other 2 brands. And for that reason, I'm going to put the Sanwa in third place. So last category I want to talk about is value. So which of these do I think is the best value? The Sanwa basically sells for $88 online, the Futaba for $109.99, and the Spektrum also for $109.99. That's for the non-AVC receiver, and that's also for the non-telemetry receiver. If you want those extra features, they cost a little bit more. But I'm talking about the base model ones, the ones that most people are going to buy. And so value-wise, I think the Spektrum is actually the best value. Even though it's not the cheapest, it has way, way, way more features. You get like this radio is definitely like a class above these other two in terms of features, in terms of capabilities, even in terms of channels, right? It's a 5-channel radio with programmable buttons and switches and that kind of thing. It's just a crazy amount of features packed into a $109 radio. And for me, this is definitely the best value. Second place, I'm actually going with the Sanwa. It's the cheapest of the bunch. It's got most of the capabilities of the Futaba. It doesn't have the 4-wheel steering and mixing and that kind of thing. It does not have telemetry, although most people are not really going to use telemetry on the Futaba. So, you know, for $88, you're getting most of the features of Futaba and at, you know, quite a bit less money. So for me, I think the Sanwa is the next best value. And then obviously Futaba is going to be the most expensive and the lowest value from sort of how I see things. But, you know, obviously all the prices are fairly close. And so, you know, there's not like a big difference in value. It's not like one is a $200 radio and one's like a $100 radio. But that's kind of how I rank those three. So that's pretty much it for my review. I am going to pick which is my favorite radio of the three. Now, obviously, the Spektrum leads in some categories. The Futaba leads in some categories. The Sanwa, not really. I guess it leads in, I don't know what it leads in. Construction. But so my pick for the best entry-level radio on the market today of the three of these, really these three represent the big giants of the RC world. My pick is the Spektrum DX5C. I think this is the best overall radio you can buy on the market today. Yes, it's got an annoying buying procedure. Some people complain about glitching. I had no issues with glitching. It's kind of big, bulky, ugly. The steering wheel's got that weird little notch right there in the middle. But overall, this is a very, very good radio. I mean, the features are head and shoulders above the other two. The controls are very, very good. The performance of the radio is definitely fast enough for, you know, 95% of the people out there. Overall, I think this is an excellent radio. The value is there. You know, just overall, you can basically do anything you want with this radio. You can bash, you can race, you can do crawling, whatever. Excuse me. It's an excellent radio, and this is really kind of surprising because this is my first Spektrum radio. I've had 2 different Futabas. I've had like 5 or 6 different Sanwas, but I was really pleasantly surprised with how good this radio is. I think for $109, it is a steal. It's pretty much like a $200 radio for the price of $100, and it's just so much better than these other two. While I think the Futaba is actually very fast, maybe it's a good race radio, I didn't really like the control layouts. I didn't really like, you know, basically actually using it that much. It's sort of my least favorite radio to actually hold and actually drive a car with, just because of the control layout so bad. But you know, it's a good radio overall, but, you know, little things like that kind of bother me. And just the amount of features and functionality on these two radios is definitely just a step down from the Spektrum. So my favorite radio, my pick for 2018 by the Spektrum DX5C. I think it's an awesome radio. You can't really go wrong with it. And anyways, that's my thoughts. So anyways, thank you for watching. If you have thoughts on these radios, you know, if you think the FlySky FSGT 3B is the most awesome thing ever, put down a comment below. Let me know what you think about these radios. Anyways, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe as always, and look for more videos in the future. Thanks. Bye.